Welcome to Buddha at the Gas Pump. My name is Rick Archer. Buddha at the Gas Pump is an ongoing series of interviews with spiritually awakening people. I think Peter Cutler, my guest today, is number 390. So if you haven't watched any of these before and you'd like to check out previous ones, go to batgap.com, B-A-T-G-A-P, and look under the past interviews menu where you'll find all the previous ones organized and categorized in various ways. This show is made possible by the support of appreciative viewers and listeners, and so if you appreciate it and feel like supporting it, there's a donate button on every page of the site and a donate page that explains all that in a little bit more detail. So my guest today is Peter Cutler. Peter calls himself a spiritual midwife, evolutionary, healer, author, and artist. He lives down in Sedona, Arizona, where pretty much everyone in town describes themselves that way, right? Peter had a profound awakening experience at the tender age of 22, which we'll talk about, but we're going to even talk about things prior to that before we get to that. 10 days after it began, he promptly fell back into the dream state most of us consider our lives, not having a clue what had happened. He began a spiritual search that took him through many spiritual teachers, practices, and traditions, finally flowering as this great light of profound peace, unconditional love, freedom, and contentment. As he first discovered at age 22, the radiance of this awake being seems to have a profound effect on people, often leading to remarkable healings. This made it crystal clear that we don't awaken for ourselves alone. As a spiritual midwife, for those who are ready, Peter assists in the birth of the awakened nature that lies within each of us. He offers weekly teachings, healing, living awake groups, retreats, and private sessions at his spiritual center in Sedona, the Sedona Zendo of the Awakened Heart, or online. His first book is The Zen of Love, Discover Your Own Awakened Heart. It's available on Amazon, and there's a free digital download of the book, which I'll be linking to on his page on Batgap. And Peter says about the book, this book will improve your relationships, miraculously so if you honestly follow its suggestions. If you're not in a relationship, it will teach you the secret of irresistible magnetic attraction. Okay, so what does irresistible magnetic attraction have to do with awakening, for starters?
Well, the book itself was kind of like a bridge, right? Because I found that when I was teaching, a transmission would kind of happen so people could really experience this awakened nature, maybe not even from anything that I said, just sort of being in the room with me. But then it would fade after, a few days. So if the thing was on, Saturday, then by Tuesday or Wednesday, they'd already start coming back into a life with problems and suffering and things like that. So I wanted to find a bridge that would, that would allow them to stay like this and not have to keep coming to me, basically, because this is something in them that's awakened. It's not me. And the transmission is just awakening something that's already in them, right? But they keep forgetting this. So in order to find this, I went on a 7-month silent retreat. It was only supposed to be 3 months, but it just kept. I didn't want to come out of it once I was in it. It was so beautiful. And about 5 months in, a realization of how I'd awakened came to me that was totally unlike everything that I thought it was. I mean, I've been doing like Zen practice for 30 years or so, and many other different practices, and those all helped, but it was really life itself, and particularly experiences of love and relationships that had actually brought this to be.
So when you say a realization of how you awakened, what you realized was that your relationships were for you a powerful catalyst for your awakening? Is that what you mean?
Well, yes, but really all of life was. From the moment I was born, everything that had happened to me was guiding me to this. And the relationships were a very, very powerful part, to find love. What I found was people don't understand really what love is, the way I'm speaking about love, this unconditional love that's always here, that never changes. The sort of essence and foundation of all existence, right? They don't experience this, they don't feel this, but in every relationship, every feeling of love, no matter whether it's for another person, a pet, a child, it doesn't matter what it is, there's a seed of this. And that's what I discovered there. There was a seed of this for everyone. So that was the bridge that I could show people this. And I've done this before with people. Sometimes people will, someone will leave them and a relationship will break up and they just feel despondent. They feel like they've lost love. They've lost a piece of themselves. And it can go on for years like this. They can be suicidal. It's very, a lot of suffering comes from this. So I started working with a few friends of this and could introduce them to this experience that the love that they felt at the very highest level with that person was already in them before they even met them, during the time, and after it's over, it's still there now. So that would give them enormous relief because they would feel that this was true. Right? They could feel this still sense of love. It's not coming from outside, from a person. It's something that's in us always. Yeah. It's basically the foundation of what we are.
Yeah, I mean, there's that saying, you know, God is love. And Muktananda used to say, God dwells within you as you. So that if God is love and God is dwelling within you as you, then you are love.
Yes.
So what you're saying is when you have a relationship and love sort of bubbles up and becomes much more vivid in your experience, you're getting a kind of a glimpse into who and what you really and everything else ultimately are.
Yeah, okay. Especially the falling in love part, that the falling in love part is actually an introduction to awakened nature, to awakened consciousness, if it's intense enough. Yeah. And then after a while it sort of fades and we feel like, you know, start noticing problems with people or whatever happens. It's like the honeymoon phase is over. And we kind of think of the honeymoon phase as something that's illusional. It's not like, oh, well, eventually you'll come back to life. You're like glowing now, but eventually you'll come back to the real world where you won't have this. But the real world is the dream world. It's the falling in love where you're starting to open to what you truly are. Because my experience is, it's springtime, maybe that's part of it now, but basically always I feel the falling in love, you know, that most intense falling in love. It's just my nature, you know? And it's wonderful. I mean, there's a certain glow that happens from that and people pick up on it. You know, they can sense this. When someone falls in love and they're in that relationship and they're just in that heightened falling in love phase, everybody knows it. They don't have to say anything. They just walk down the street and people feel happier just being around them, right?
Yeah.
Because that's in them too. And all of a sudden they have a recognition. It's a transmission. So everybody that's in that falling in love phase is transmitting to other people. Just the same way a guru does or anything. It's exactly the same thing. They're showing people what they are and they're recognizing it. What they are recognizes it and sort of comes to the surface for a moment.
Yeah. Of course, there's usually a lot of other crazy stuff going on, a lot of hormonal, you know, things and...
yeah, there's all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of filters because our conditioned thoughts. So we think like, one, it's the other person that's doing it. Right? The other person is somehow giving me this feeling. But it isn't that at all. They're just reminding you what you are. And yet we put all our focus on the other person instead of looking in and saying, where is this feeling coming from? And besides all the hormonal stuff, what is deeper than that? What's deeper than that?
Yeah, I remember hearing, I don't know if this is true, but I remember hearing that certain Native American tribes considered falling in love to be a form of insanity, and they'd kind of lock the people up in separate teepees until they got over it.
I think all of conditioned society thinks that.
Yeah, and you know, and people do all kinds of crazy things in the state of so-called falling in love, and there seems to be a spectrum in terms of how sublime or ridiculous it can be. Robin Williams famously said that God gave man both a penis and a brain, but unfortunately not enough blood supply to run both at the same time. Yeah. So I don't know, you know, it's like it's one of these euphemistic phrases that's almost seems a bit overused because there's so much craziness associated with it, and it doesn't like seem to, in many cases, if not most, it doesn't seem to bear a heck of a lot of resemblance to what we would understand enlightenment to be. But I understand your point. And I think on an esoteric level, there's sort of energies being enlivened that are very central to the whole process of enlightenment. It's just a matter of what we do with those energies.
Yeah, yeah. But I think it's best to take away all the concepts about it, you know, because we have so many concepts of love. We need to take away that word love and feel what's beyond concepts, because love is beyond concepts. God is beyond concepts. So the word God, if people have concepts about God, it stands in the way of their direct realization of God. If they have concepts about love, it stands in the way of their direct realization of love, of the love that I'm speaking about, that doesn't, and is no different than God. It is no different than life. It's basically, the simple way of saying it is, it means no separation. It's just the realization, the direct experience of no separation. It's a very powerful thing. And so when people have that falling in love phase, what happens? They don't feel a separation, at least between the person that they're loving. Somehow that falls away, and that feels amazingly good. You know, they walk down the street and they really don't feel that separate from anything that's happening around them. So the other people pick up on that, you know, they just feel the oneness.
Yeah, that's good. Well, we'll talk about this a lot more, and I want to get into your story a little bit more, so people have a better sense of who you are and how you got to be where you are. And I thought an interesting place to start might be your story of Ginny when you were 5 years old.
Oh. You read my book.
I read your book. And I remember when I was 5 years old being in love with a snake. I had this pet snake in the backyard, and I can distinctly remember just feeling this tremendous love for this snake that I had in a little box or something.
Yeah, yeah.
But Ginny was more than that.
Well, Ginny was my neighbor, and my childhood was not the most pleasant childhood. There was a great deal of suffering. Both my parents were alcoholics, and there was a lot of violence in the house. And so I often stayed by myself. You know, I went out in the woods. We were surrounded by woods, my house, so it was beautiful. I could escape and be out there, and there I felt very at one. But Ginny was my neighbor, and I felt very connected to her. You know, I loved her, right? I mean, this was like, I think this might have been the first child that I had met, other than around these crazy adults. And her life wasn't, her family life wasn't quite as crazy as mine, but you know, we like just really bonded together. And then she was a year younger than me, so I started school, and she came, when I was in first grade, she was in kindergarten, she came into the school.
And I'll just cut you off here for a second to say that in your book you elaborate a bit on just how totally sweet and innocent and full of love your relationship was with her. There was like this incredible bond between the two of you. But go ahead. So she, meanwhile, I'd been in school for a year, and you know, was with different like boys in the school, and wanted to have friends and how to fit in, trying to fit in and everything. And these boys hated girls for whatever reason. I don't know why. They just thought they didn't want to associate with girls. They had cooties.
Cooties,
right.
Exactly. Yeah. So whatever they were. And so, you know, I played along with that in order to fit in. And during the first day of school in the second year, when I was in first grade, Ginny was came to school, and she was so excited because she was going to go to school with me, you know, and she was looking forward to this, and she was looking all over the school for me, and I was the only person that she knew. And so when she found me, she went running up to me and hugged me, and you know, my friends were there, and they were like looking at me with like, what the hell are you doing? You know, what's going on here? So I pretended I didn't know her. I just like kind of pushed her away and pretended I didn't know her, and said, you know, you can't come up to me in school. And it just destroyed her. You know, she, just this, you know, young, sweet girl, and it just destroyed her. She didn't actually come to school for the next week, and her parents didn't want me to associate with her, and I really hurt her. And it was, it destroyed me. I mean, it felt so terrible to do that. It was like my first betrayal, not only of her, but of myself, because I did love her, you know, and I didn't really know these. I was just trying to fit in with these guys. I didn't even know them, you know, and here was someone that I really knew in a very close, intimate way. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was sad.
Yeah, I found this.
I don't think much about my past,
Mm-hmm.
my life. I mean, I write it in a book when it's appropriate and it comes up and it's useful to teach somebody or help
Mm-hmm.
somebody. It comes, but the way that I sense my path and feel about my past is that it's a dream, you know? It feels like a dream, and when it's time to remember it, if it serves some purpose, it just comes right up, and along with the feelings and everything, but I don't have an identification with it as me or
Yeah.
anything that actually even happened in a way. It's like, this is a dream that happened, you know? But I learned from it, though.
Sure.
I mean, everything that happened, all these dream episodes in my past were part of awakening to this, to the truth. Everything, that too. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I just found the story poignant. I mean, you know, just the sort of the shattering of the childhood innocence and purity that you were experiencing there was,
Yeah.
you know, a real lesson.
Yeah, and heartbreaking.
Yeah.
You know? Heartbreaking. And
if we could all be as innocent as you were before that betrayal, you know, what a world it would be.
yes, well, we come back to that too,
Yeah.
because this state now is purely innocent. It's just absolutely pure and innocent. It's the same as a child. It's even more innocent than that child now, entirely vulnerable, you know? So it takes some, I guess one of the reasons that we don't want to stay here is because of this complete vulnerability and nakedness and openness. This is what kind of scares us back into the conditioned life, you know? But at some point we see that this is like all powerful. The vulnerability, the innocence it's unlimited in what it is. This is the true power. Being like, you know, like a person that you can, some solid person that you can say, this is who I am, is not power.
Yeah.
It's totally vulnerable. It's got so many chinks in it. We're always trying to protect it.
And it takes a lot of energy and effort to protect it.
Yeah, it does. So when you let go of it, you have this enormous energy because you're not doing that anymore. You're not living in a thought world.
Yeah.
The real world, your body is naturally filled with energy, extraordinary energy. I mean, you couldn't be alive without it. Your cells, everything needs this energy. So when you let go of using it for things that are not productive, all of a sudden you find this. That's why when you wake up, you have these experiences of bliss where your whole body is like an electric charge is running through it, you know, and love too is part of that. None of it is separate. Bliss, love, peace, it's all the same thing. God, there is no separation. It just depends what we want to call it. And when we call it something, then it has a different kind of a feeling.
Yeah. It's sort of like different flavors of the same food, you know. Maybe there's some food and it's kind of sweet, but it's tangy and it's a little bit, you know, something else, you know, different qualities all mixed in, but they're all reflective of the same fundamental reality.
It's all the same thing. Yeah. It's all the same.
Well, let's learn a little bit more about the you that you're not in terms of how you kind of progressed along. You know, I mean, people like a little bit of the personal story, even though I get your disclaimer, but it's like because they can relate better. You know, okay, he went through this, that, and the other thing, and oh, so did I.
Yes, no, exactly. I wrote that in the book. You know, for that reason too. It's very helpful because people can put something that they can understand on something that they can't. Right. Because there is no understanding what this is. I have no idea what I am.
Yeah. It also humanizes it. I mean, if people sort of think, oh, that guy's just as much of a turkey as I am, you know, he's been through he's made similar mistakes and this and that, and he seems to be doing okay, so maybe there's hope for me.
Exactly. Yes. No, that's a very important part of it. Yeah. So, as I said, I grew up in a family with two alcoholic parents and a mother that didn't want children. You know, I was the firstborn, so all the way back to the womb, I felt this like not wanting to be there, this kind of rejection, abandonment. And there was a lot of violence, you know, just unpredictable, drunken violence in the house. So as a young child, it was very frightening to be in the house. And one of the things that
it's amazing, because you said your father was incredibly handsome, and he stayed incredibly handsome even into his 80s. You'd think he would have looked a little weather-beaten given the lifestyle.
He was tough. Well, he worked outside all the time, and when he wasn't working outside, he was doing sports and stuff. He was an athlete.
I see.
So he spent a lot of time doing that, and that allowed him to be drunk. My mother, you know, they started in the morning drinking, you know, and then, you know, she would just go all day, and then until she like passed out at night. So what happened was I needed to, one, have this kind of empathic experience, because I needed to know if it was safe to be in the house, you know, what was going, without going in there, because then I was kind of stuck if they were angry or whatever, wanted to do something to me. You know, where were you? I had to know what was going on inside before I even entered the house. So I developed this kind of very open perception of people's feelings and thoughts, which was difficult as a child. But when I was alone in the woods that surrounded the house, I often felt like totally filled with peace, and it was like filled with love, you know, like where was this coming from? I didn't know. I felt completely connected with the surroundings out there. I knew every little cave that was there, and I felt connected with all the animals and birds, just no separation. It felt so wonderful. And it was probably what allowed me to survive my childhood, you know, to have this one part where I wasn't totally terrified. Because when I was in the house, I was terrified. You know, I would, you know, in the West, they talk about in Westerns, sleeping with one eye open, you know, like when they discover gold and the partner, they come and kill them and sleep or something, you sleep. And so I slept with one eye open. It was like I was always ready to get up and try and get away if something dangerous was going to happen. I had no lock on my door. I never knew what was going to happen. And every morning I would wake up feeling like, I survived, you know. But I lived in terror, basically. So I lived afraid of everything. So I had this feeling of this presence of light and love when I was alone. And when I first heard the word God, I called it the presence of God. You know, that's just what I felt. And actually, I was pretty accurate to it too. But I suppose at around age 11 or 12, I started being really interested in girls and, you know, being a rock and roll star, whatever, you know. So I forgot about that. I kind of let that part go, just put it way into the background, and, you know, wasn't paying attention to it anymore. It was a big part of my life up until around 11 or 12. I found this children's book about St. Francis of Assisi, and I just completely connected with it. We were supposed to write book reports, and everybody was doing like Lou Gehrig or something like that, right? And yeah, I saw this, and I didn't write a book report on it because I didn't want anybody to know that I was totally fascinated with this guy's life and this monk life. And I just felt like it's so much like mine, right? He has this, I don't know if his family was as dysfunctional, but they were fairly wealthy and well off. And he took this poverty thing, and I felt somehow very, very close to that, you know, because he'd also had that experience that I had when I was alone, this field with light and love. So, but at age 12 or so, that stopped. It just sort of faded into the background, and I became really interested in girls, you know, basically. That was it. Everything was sort of going around that. And so that just went on until I was around 22. I went to my mother was in a rehab center. When she would get so drunk that her life was endangered and she was in a hospital, they'd send her to a rehab center afterwards. So she was in a rehab center. And
by this time you were married with a couple of kids.
I was, yeah. I was around 22. Yeah, I was married. Yeah, so what happens when you're interested in sex that much? I had a shotgun marriage. And, but the kids were amazing though. Probably saved my life, really. And, so they invited family members to come down over the last week that she was there to help her, you know, sort of reacclimate and maybe not be an alcoholic anymore. So my brother and I agreed to go down there. It was in Florida, and we were in the north, so we had a chance to go down for a week in warm weather, and probably that was at least part of our reason to go. And maybe something could help. Maybe something could happen. Nothing had before. So we went down there, and as people were telling these stories, it was like an AA meeting, right? So in AA meetings, people tell the stories of like, this is what I did, and this is all the terrible things that I did and that happened when I was a drunk. So people were telling these stories, and I was listening to this. I'd never been to an AA meeting, so I felt so angry, like hearing these stories. I mean, it was bad enough that my mother had like ruined the lives of her kids. But this one guy in particular, he was the head of surgery at a New York hospital, a very well-known New York hospital, and he was the head of surgery. And he talked about how he would come in, from like an alcohol and pills, and his hand would be shaking so much that a lot of people died on the operating table when he would do this, and that the staff would cover up for it because he was the head of surgery. They couldn't say anything about it, I guess, or didn't. And he felt terrible about this because he knew it was because of that, but he couldn't stop. And he was pouring his heart out, but I just was furious. It just made me so angry. I said, this guy is murdering people, I just wasn't feeling warm to these people telling these stories. I thought it was terrible and inexcusable. So after listening to that for the second day, I told my brother, I said, I can't take this anymore. I'm going home. I'm going to just I'm going to start attacking them or something. It's like, I can't take this. So I packed my bag, and that night I went to sleep that night, totally ready to leave the next day. And I woke up, right? When I woke up, there was no more of that person that was angry, that had been angry for so long. It was gone completely. There was no self-identity at all. I just felt love. I felt like I was love. I was filled with light and love, just like when I was a young child in the woods, but much more intense. Like when I was a young child and I experienced that, I was still a person experiencing it. At this point, there was no person to experience it. It just was that. That was all. And
had you already been doing a bunch of spiritual practice at this point, or did this come out of the blue?
Not much. This came really out of the blue. As a hippie and a rock and roll drummer, I did acid and stuff.
Hey, I was a drummer too.
Yeah. Oh, were you? Cool. Yeah. Yeah. So, I'd had some experiences doing that. And then when my kids were born, at some point, people came over in the band, and they were people were smoking pot and around them. And I thought, my God, these are just little innocent babies. I can't do this anymore. So I said, no one can smoke in my house.
Yeah.
And I stopped. I said, how am I going to stop? I just started getting interested in yoga and meditation because I knew other people who had done that. So I did that. So I'd been, but I was I got a book by Swami Satchidananda on yoga, right? So I was doing some yoga things, and I had another book on Raja Yoga, which is meditation, like focusing on a candle and doing that. So I'd been doing that for about a year, but I knew nothing about, other than the acid trips, spiritual stuff, really. Oh, I had a book by Yogananda called How to Know God. Mm-hmm. And so I'd read that. But there was really no preparation at all. I mean, I understood the word God. Basically, what I thought is I was the second coming of Jesus Christ. That's all I could know. I mean, I didn't know what to say. So I said, maybe that happened because I was healing people. In this rehab center, these people would come to me and were just drawn to me. And they would come and be sobbing, and I would hold them. This didn't happen before, but all of a sudden, all these people were coming to me, drawn to me, and I somehow was healing them, because I had this radiance. It was literally glowing radiance. I mean, I felt that was happening, but people actually saw it. And so, yeah, that was it. It came totally out of the blue. And that's why I said, 10 days later, it faded. After I left the place, it was still happening. When I was on the plane, the stewardess came and said, can I sit with you? I don't act this. And she sat with me, and she had to move the guy sitting next to me to another seat. She moved him up to first class.
Wow.
And you know, and she sat with me and she was telling me about this. I was just there, just this hippie, you know, and she said, I don't know why I'm telling you this. And she told me about this, this relationship she was in, this traumatic relationship with her boyfriend, and it was really bothering her. She was sobbing, and I held her the same way I did the other ones. I loved everyone, and I saw everyone. It's like I could see their entire life from the time they were an infant up to that point, and everything that had happened. But it happened all at once, so I didn't like separate things out, but I could feel them. And all I could feel was love, like the guy who was the doctor. He did the same. He came and I hugged him and I felt nothing but love for him. It was exactly the opposite of what I had felt before. For everybody, I felt this, you know, and that was amazing. I mean, it showed me something that love it's not what we think it is at all. I mean, it has the power to totally to heal people. It's incredible.
Yeah.
You know, it has way more power than we have any idea, any concept of what it is. And so I didn't know anything about it. And when I got home, my wife was scared, you know, because she saw like, who is this guy? You know, like it just frightened her because I was so totally different, you know, but I completely loved her. You know, I had a lot of problems with her. We had a shotgun marriage, and, you know, I was actually in love with somebody else when we met, and she got pregnant and this and wanted to, you know, and I had a lot of problems with her. But there I just felt enormous love for everybody, you know. My neighbor, who kind of was this kind of disgruntled like guy and was really angry with me all the time. I just totally loved him too. But after I felt this desire for people to have me come back to where I was, you know, to somebody that they could see instead of this saint, I suppose, you know. And it just happened, I guess. I don't really know why or how. I think it happened because I wasn't ready. You know, I wasn't ready to embody this for the rest of my life. So what I had was a glimpse of what life could be like, you know, of what reality is. And that was enough for me to go on a path to try and find out what it was, to get it back again, you know.
Yeah. More often than not, that's the way it goes. You know, people have some profound glimpse and then it fades over some time, and then they think, all right, now I've got to figure out what that was and make it permanent, you know.
Exactly. Like, what the hell was that about?
God gives us a taste.
Yeah. So I got really interested in looking and finding what was this, and doing meditation practices and studying. You know, it just, I mean, there were times when I wasn't totally focused on that, but it was always in the background, because it was so much. And I didn't see the world the same way ever again, you know? I mean, I didn't totally believe everything I was seeing, because I knew there was something much more and much more real and much more beautiful than this.
Yeah. So I know words don't do justice to it, and but let's talk a little bit about what love is. Remember, so that brings up Forrest Gump. You know? I may not be a smart man, but I know what love is.
He was filled with love.
Yeah,
that's why he was so successful in everything he did.
Yeah, true.
Because he didn't know he couldn't be.
Yeah,
right?
there was this innocence about him.
Yeah, we understand our unlimited nature. We don't put these concepts about how limited we are.
Yeah.
We just let them go. It's not like we say, I am unlimited. It's just we let the limited go, and what's left is the unlimited. You know, we put what isn't love, we let that go, and then there's just love. Because love is something that's here, right? This is what I teach people these practices who are going through all kinds of different suffering to embrace them. It's not uncommon, right? You've talked to so many people doing this, is instead of trying to escape, which is our natural way from painful feelings, we totally open to them. We go the other way. We totally open to them. But these painful feelings always turn out to be illusions. And when we open to them, it reveals that it's an illusion. And then we're free. It's let go. But when we open to love and we say, well, let go of that, we can't. It just grows deeper. And the same with peace. You know, these are not emotions. Love is not an emotion. It's a fundamental essence of what we are. It's a very different thing. It's not something that we feel, it's something that we are. And we really are this. So it's on the deepest, deepest level. This is what we are. The bodies come and go, but this stays. This is something that doesn't leave. It's beyond the physical world. It's beyond bodies, but it's in the physical world and it's in bodies. It's not like God. It's not separate from anything, form or formless.
Yeah, well, that right there is a good definition of what love is. It's not an emotion. It's not merely something we feel. It's what we are.
Yeah, and you do feel it, though. I mean, it is like the experience of falling in love, when you feel just this blissful feeling and you're like connected to everything. It is like that, you know.
Yeah.
So people who, when they're falling in love, that's why I say that that's an experience of truth. That's like my opening on a lesser level to my opening when I was 22, where I felt that that's all I was at that point. It's like being, you know, going into the sun. It just burned up everything else somehow. And the reason it happened, at one point I was, well, for quite a while I felt I was channeling, right? I would ask a question and this, what I called God, would answer, right? I would ask a question, I would get an answer. Every time, you know, instantly. The most puzzling things in my life would just instantly be answered in the most obvious way, you know, and I would always feel like, oh, you know, duh, how did I miss that, right? Because I missed everything. It was amazing. It really was humbling, and also had me lose trust in my mind because I was 100% wrong. I mean, how are you 100% wrong with everything that happens in your life? But I was, you know, excellent at being completely wrong. I was like, you know, I would have an A in missing every single thing. But then when I asked, it was the right answer was given to me, you know, and it was so obvious, not mystical. It was really just much more obvious. But about that experience that I had at 22, it simply said, of course I would ask about that. It's just what you needed, you know? You were going in the wrong direction and you needed that experience to put you back on the path again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't think I mean, it could be some kind of channeling thing where there's some, you know, guardian angel or something that's feeding us answers, but it could also just be, and maybe this is probably what you think, right? Just your own innate, deeper intelligence that you're tapping into more clearly.
Yeah. Yes, because your own innate intelligence is not separate from God, from any formless beings, from any of that. You are all of that.
Yeah.
So of course it could come into you because you are that. You let go of what's an obstacle to that. And channeling is interesting. Well, you know, in Sedona, a lot of people do channeling, right? So the channeling is coming from them, but they have a certain name for it. And I did for years. I said, this is coming from God, you know, this channeling is coming from God. And I wouldn't accept that there was no separation between me and God. It was me and God. And I had a relationship like Muji calls it, being held in the lap of God. Mm-hmm. So for years I was held in the lap of God. I was guided to do things. Things were given to me. Events would just spontaneously come up, which was exactly what I needed. And I just surrendered. I just kept surrendering and surrendering. But I was surrendering. Mm-hmm. I was surrendering to God. And at some point, the I it just wasn't of any use anymore, really. You know, it just sort of like got smaller and smaller until it just faded away. And all that's left is life.
Mm-hmm. And do you still get answers and stuff like, you know, supportive nature, we could call it, or, you know?
In every way I ask now. At one point I thought, well, I'm not going to ask a really unimportant question like, what should I have to eat tonight? Or, you know, what color should this graphic be in a website or something? But now I do that, everything. I don't trust my mind for anything. You know, I don't say like, oh, I think this would be a good color. I don't care what I think. I don't care what my opinions are. They're meaningless because there's something else that knows everything. And so I don't feel bad about asking everything. You know,
so
I have a little.
So pretty much you're totally running on intuition with everything, every little thing. You go into a restaurant and you feel like there's some kind of guidance as to what to choose on the menu or whatever.
And which restaurant and why I went into that and who I'm going to meet and everything. And, you know, I just surrender to life and it's taken care of me, you know, and that's the thing. When you surrender to it, you see that it takes care of you. Do you know who Peace Pilgrim is?
Oh, yeah, I love Peace Pilgrim.
Right? Peace Pilgrim. So Peace Pilgrim totally surrendered. to the point where she would walk with no money back and forth across the country. And, and she would sleep on the side of the road, right? Or she would, and she wouldn't eat until someone invited her, met her. And she was taken care of for years like that. And the more she did it, it was clear she's taken care of. This is what Zen monks do when they go on a pilgrimage, right? They have no money, they've got a begging bowl, they just walk a great distance, like maybe back and forth across the country like she did. And you find when you do it that life is taking care of you, but it always has been from the time you were born. You cannot take care of you. You don't have control of what's going on in this body, your liver, your kidneys. You're not consciously saying, get to work here, do this. It would be way too much work. Talk about the stress of just trying to be a person if you tried to control your body. All this stuff is being taken care of, all of it. There's this infinite intelligence here, like when it's springtime where you are, right? So spring here is just started here. So the buds are just starting to come up on the trees. So you look at that. The tree didn't say it's time to make the buds. There's an infinite intelligence that's doing all of this. And so we can see this in nature, and we can accept this easily in nature, but not so much with ourselves, because we want to have some control. We believe if we didn't have control, everything would fall apart.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. The fact is, it just becomes miraculous. The things that you need come to you before you even know that you need them. At the same moment you get it, you go, oh, I needed that. Oh, thank you. But you're not even thinking you need it. You're not manifesting like, I think I need this. You don't even think about it until it comes. And then you have it. It's everything. There's a perfection in life that we don't understand, that we don't see. It's like at this point, my feeling is that everything that happens is absolutely perfect and absolutely for my highest benefit, whatever it is. It could be cancer. It could be, losing my house, becoming homeless. But I know that whatever happens is perfect. There's just this inner trust and knowing of this, because it's happened so often like this. Something that I thought would be bad turns out to be exactly what I needed. And then once I realize that and realize what the lesson is, then the thing just resolves by itself.
Do you agree, though, that not everyone could sort of just instantly snap into that way of functioning? I mean, we couldn't you couldn't take any old person anywhere and say, okay, start functioning the way Peace Pilgrim did, and wandering around the country with just a shirt on your back. I mean, Peace, if you read Peace Pilgrim's book... it wasn't an instantaneous thing like that. She worked her way up to it, and then at one point she was sitting somewhere, I think out in a rock, and the peace came to her. Yeah. She had a very profound inner enlightened condition, and it enabled her to function that way.
But for everybody, this is happening from the moment we're born. Everything is guiding us to this point, whether most of us don't accept it. It's like there's enormous resistance. And, when we work with students, it's like what we do is try and let the resistance go, And love is a beautiful way of doing it, because people are used to saying like, oh, love is good, I don't need to resist this, right? It's not as scary as how about emptiness? Yeah, I could resist that. That doesn't sound that good, right? Because we don't know what emptiness is, right? When we experience that, then we like it. But love, everybody likes.
Yeah.
Everybody likes love. So when to do that, to sit in a room with people and allow them to experience love, often I feel it is, it's like something is coming down through the crown chakra and filling your body, this light, I can even see it happening. And when I healed people, that's all I did. I would just describe what was happening and ask them to let go and say, this knows what it's doing. It's totally for your benefit. And they could do that. So they would stop resisting, and then the resistance in their body would loosen up, and what needed to be healed would be healed, because they're not resisting it anymore. When they say, oh, I have this terrible problem, that's filled with resistance. It's they're calling it a problem instead of a message or a benefit. And they're feeling pain, and they're feeling all these things because of this resistance. When the resistance goes, the natural healing ability of the body just happens, because it's always trying to heal itself, But it has messages when we're not doing it, and the message is stop resisting. Stop resisting. Life is here. Life has got your back.
Yeah. I guess that just a little doubt in the back of my mind is that just that this, in my understanding and experience, this is sort of a progressive thing. It's not like somebody can hear this message for the first time and realistically expect to snap into the state of functioning you're describing.
No.
And if we assume everyone can, then most people are going to be disappointed.
Yes, right.
Pardon?
It's a gradual thing, and it was for me too. I mean, it took many, many, many years for this to happen. I was in a Zen practice for a very long time, which has its own traditions and rituals and things that go along, which is lovely and a good way of opening to this. Mm-hmm. But when I really opened to it, there was the healing, there was the channeling. There's nothing in Zen about this, right? I had to just go like, I don't know what this is. This is like, but it's happening. And then I just surrendered more and more, just surrendering all attachments, you know.
Sure.
And it was definitely a progression. It's a progression now. The progression never ends, but there's this enormous trust. So that's here now, right? And the trust had to be kind of earned with me because I'm skeptical. I grew up very skeptical, you know. I don't trust anything, you know. It was very hard to accept my first teacher. I saw many teachers and I rejected all of them. It's like, no, that person had a cold. No, he can't be perfect. Accept that. That was Sri Shimoy, my friend, sort of disciple, and he brought me to him and had a cold, and that was it for me. No, he's got a cold, he can't be good enough, you know. So there was a lot of resistance, a lot of skepticism about everything. So it had to be proven in real, practical, material world for me, in just over and over and over and over again. Things that we would call miracles, right, that we just can't explain would happen. You know, things that are just, they're unexplainable. And that got me to think like, I don't understand the world at all. I'm surrendering to not understanding it because these things are happening and they don't logically make any sense. The healing itself was a miracle. It didn't make any sense to me. Why would I be healing people? I knew nothing about this. You know, like Jesus was a carpenter. He didn't study healing. He didn't like go to school for healing. He didn't think about it. It just happened.
Yeah.
You know, and then what are you going to do if this happens? You feel compelled, like we feel compelled to teach when we have an awakening. It's like it's not our decision. We weren't thinking, I want to be a teacher. That would be a cool thing to do. Maybe some do, but most don't. You know, it just comes upon them. It's this inner thing is acting like channeling, right? Something is taking you over, and you realize it's okay. This is better than I was, better than this frightened, you know, person that's scared of its own shadow and like that, you know, that it's better. Yeah. You know?
And some people do think, hey, it would be cool to be a teacher, and I think sometimes they're premature in that assumption. And another thing I just wanted to add is that I wouldn't discount Zen as having been very influential in what you're now experiencing, even though Zen didn't talk about that stuff. Same thing with Adyashanti. I mean, he's sort of talking about and experiencing a lot of things these days that really weren't part of his Zen training. Right. But, you know, everything we do along the way, I think, contributes to what eventually unfolds.
Absolutely. Oh, no, Zen was amazing. And Thich Nhat Hanh, that particular teacher, was just a very loving, you know. When I first encountered Thich, he was the first teacher that I accepted. I listened to an audio tape of his and heard his voice, and I realized, wow, this guy is like, he's the mother and the father, both. And I didn't really have the experience of a mother and father, you know. Later I did with my father, but in the beginning, no, and never really with my mother. And so here was this loving mother and father right here. So I said, okay, that's it. I can go for that. You know,
and he didn't have a cold either, huh?
He didn't have a cold. No, I'd never seen him with a cold, actually. But he has a stroke now, so he's not in that same space. Yeah. But since I moved to Sedona, people said, "Oh, you're going to leave the Sangha. Is there a Sangha there? You're going to leave the Sangha." So everything, there's an addiction and attachment to the Sangha, which was beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful. It's easy to get attached to that. And I don't know, but I was compelled to come to Sedona, so I had to come. And there wasn't, you know, everything was new here. I knew nobody, and it was, you know, I got involved with Muji and Ramana. I didn't know about Ramana before, and Papaji, and
Not in person, but reading books and looking at videos and all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Advaita,
Right.
very much into Advaita. And Mooji, I very much identified with Mooji when I saw him. I mean, what happened is I'd seen a couple of things and I said, awesome, a Jamaican guy with this cool accent. This is great. I'm really happy to have see a spiritual teacher from Jamaica. How rare is that? And, just that. And then one day I picked up a book and I realized that he was an artist and he was painting sort of like I do, these Zen paintings. So I just felt, I felt like that was me, like here was not me, but there Mooji was me. And I went to my friend who had an ashram across the street and I took this picture of Mooji and I said, would you like to see a picture of me? And he said, sure. And I showed him the picture of Mooji. He said, that's not you. But it was, though, because Mooji was speaking from that place in me, and I wasn't quite at that place yet, that was in me. But over time I did. I did these retreats with Mooji, actually, where Mooji would have a retreat and I would invite people in and we would watch videos. I mean, his satsangs are like 2 or 3 hours long, right? And he would do it day and night. So we would have a silent retreat and just watch these videos 6 hours a day. And when I would watch, I would only hear like the first couple of words. And then I would just go into this space of bliss the whole time. And only if someone laughed or something happened would my attention go back to the video. And the rest of the time I was just sitting in bliss. But I did that every day. I always did it with the intention of watching the video, but it never happened. I just fell into this space and that was good enough, That was good. Yeah.
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 Do you have
clear, very open and very loving. And he had the experience of sitting in the lap of God, which is the same thing that I experienced. So I felt, there was something really beautiful about that.
There seems to be a tremendously devotional scene around Mooji these days,
Yeah.
People just really feeling devotional, throwing flowers in his path and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
as far as I can tell, he's handling it okay.
Yeah, he's allowing that to happen.
Yeah.
That's love, right? I mean,
I don't have a problem with it. I don't think that should be stifled. It's like people do have it's definitely a phase where you become very devotional and there needs to be a legitimate outlet for that. And I think it's important that a teacher have the maturity to be able to allow that to happen without it going to their heads,
Without it going to their heads, yeah. No, it's a guru tradition, and it has backfired and created problems for gurus and followers too, but probably not as often as we think, because those things get blown up and we really hear about that. Yeah. So many times there is no problem with it, because we're surrendering to ourself. And we're giving it over to the guru, like Ram Dass did for his guru, So that's a step, right? That's a progressive step. And the guru eventually will point it back to you and say, there's your guru. It's in you, always is in you. At first you can't accept that, and then eventually you can. And that was my experience with God, this being held in the lap of God. For a long time I couldn't accept that was me, that there wasn't any separation. And at one point, I was with a teacher in Mexico, Sahajananda, at a yoga place there. He's a beautiful, awakened guy. And I told him about this thing that other people had said. It's you who's answering these questions. It's you who's doing this. It's not a God outside of you. That I sort of intellectually understood it, but I couldn't accept it because I thought my ego would go, I'm God, go there, right? So I didn't want that to happen. I knew my ego was very powerful. So, and I told him about that, and he said that Rumi said that the most humble thing any man can say is, I am God, because then there is no you. And it just was at the right time for him to say that to me, So when he said that, that was the beginning of my acceptance, that there wasn't, because I figured the ego, one thing the ego is not is humble, right? Or he's the most humble person in the world, but he's never actually humble. And just the word humble, the ego doesn't like that. So I figured that was safe.
Yeah, well, that's very true if understood properly. If it's more like I, me, this individual is God, then you get into trouble. But but the deeper truth is you are, we are. That's all. All it is. I mean, if God is omnipresent, then show me a place which is not God. Show me something
Exactly.
something which is not God. And the scientific evidence, in my perspective, is that God is omnipresent. I mean, because you look at anything and closely enough, and you see this miracle of intelligence functioning.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Spring is a beautiful time to see this, when things come up, partly because we're not resisting as much. We love spring. Oh, look, the flowers came up, and we're not resisting at that moment. Anything that we really appreciate, anything that we love, we're not resisting at that moment, right? We're not resisting love. We see something really beautiful and it just sort of takes our breath away. And at that moment, all that's happening is we're not resisting, because everything is like this. Every single thing in life is like this. There is no problems. Everything is only this expression of God everywhere, right?
Here's a question that came in that'll switch us to a slightly different topic. Not that there's anything wrong with this topic, but I think we've pretty well covered it. This is a fellow named Joshua from Portland, Oregon, who asks, and this is what your book is all about, how can one use a relationship as a spiritual practice or to progress on the path of awakening? Is it valuable to have a partner that is also using the relationship for spiritual growth? I guess the add-on to that question would be, what if you're in a relationship with somebody who's not into spirituality, then what?
Yeah. It doesn't matter. It's your love. It's your love, right? Love is what you are. And so you're expressing love. It doesn't matter what you express love to. You could express love to someone who thinks they hate you. But you have this privilege. There's a beautiful movie called Adaptation that Nicolas Cage plays two brothers. And one brother is very kind of fancy-free and hasn't really buckled down to create a success for himself. And the other brother is a famous screenwriter. So he doesn't respect his twin brother at all. And at one point, they're being... someone's trying to kill them, shoot them, and they're hiding behind this thing and think they're not going to, live through the night. And the brother that's a screenwriter looks at his other brother, his twin brother, and says, when I started not respecting you, it's like we were in junior high school and there was this girl that you had such a crush on. You just loved her so much, and you went up and you were talking to her. And when you left, she was laughing with her friends and saying, what a loser you were. Right? And you didn't hear, you were oblivious to it. You didn't hear it at all. And the brother said, I heard every word, but there's nothing she can do because it's my love. She can't take away my love. I can love whoever I want. And the screenwriter brother realized, oh my God, this guy's really wiser than I am. He understood it, because my life is miserable. I'm having all these miserable relationships and trying to get things. So it's our love, right? And we can love anyone, and if we do enough, if we're open enough, it will heal them and transform them in the ways that they need. But I'm not in relationship now, and often I go for these long periods of silent retreat, where it's just, initially I thought it's just me and God, and that relationship is incredible, right? So, and now it's just being in love, right? Not with any object of love, just love itself. So everything I see is an object of love, right? It doesn't matter what it is. You are, this screen is, all the people listening are all, if I want to express love that way. And it's beautiful to express it. When I've been in relationships after this awakening, it's just because this love is unlimited, right? If someone doesn't give love back to you, it makes no difference at all. You're just pouring out. I had a relationship with a woman that was quite narcissistic, right? And so she was kind of an endless, like a black hole for attention, right? There was no, she could accept all the attention you could give. She could accept all the love you could give. And that's kind of rare to find someone that can accept that much. Some people may go, okay, whoa, that's a bit much. But she accepted all of it. So it just poured through me, and I felt wonderful being able to do that. I didn't need anything from her. It was just an opportunity to express love and focus it on one person rather than everywhere at once. which is just as good, you know, but that's kind of it. Yeah. I mean, that's at the high level of a relationship. And so what he's asking is, how can you use a relationship to get to that space, to get to that place, right? And that is recognize where love is coming from, that it's not from another person. And so every time we feel this love, recognize that too. You know, you're focusing on the other person, that's beautiful, but recognize where love is coming from. That this feeling, you're having that feeling. The feeling is in you. And allow yourself to see if that feeling is not always here. Always here. You know, I had that revelation when I was 16 years old. It was amazing. It just came to me. I was in love with this girl I had a crush on in high school. And I found out at some point her friend came up to me and said, like, you know, Rachel wants to know why you're not talking to her, asking her out. She has a big crush on you and you're cute. And I was like, oh, wow, I was shy, right? So I didn't talk to her. So I was really happy. I went up and talked to her. And afterwards we went back to her house, her parents' house. And they weren't home. They were both working. So, you know, we had a good time. And when I was leaving, I was walking back to my place, and it was about a 3-hour walk for me to get back to my place. We lived on two opposite ends of town. And as I was walking, you know, it was springtime like now, right? And the birds were chirping and stuff, but I was just like walking on clouds, you know? I still had this enormous love. And not only that, people who were driving by were like smiling at me and waving, adults, right? And I was kind of this scruffy sort of a juvenile delinquent, right? The adults wanted to keep their kids and everybody, you know, away from me, you know? And here, these adults were like smiling at me and laughing. I had a black leather jacket and all that. And it's, you know, it amazed me. This has never happened before. What's going on here? You know, what's happening here? I'm feeling this love, and somehow it's affecting these people around me. And I realized then that, where's this coming from? I haven't been with her for at least 2 hours, and yet I'm still feeling this. And I realized that she triggered this feeling in me that had always been here, but I was completely unaware of it, just covered over by fear, you know, and anger. And yet it had always been here, you know? I mean, it didn't last for long, but for at least that time when I was walking home, I experienced something that's very true. You know, this place. And so this is what we can see in any relationship, to see where this love is coming from and say, this is an opportunity for love. This person is giving me an opportunity to love. It doesn't matter if she's yelling at me. It doesn't matter it doesn't matter if she's sleeping with my best friend. I just find this out. It's always an opportunity to love. And that's always the answer in the end. It's always the answer, right? We can be very angry if she cheats on us with her best friend or something, you know, and crushed and angry, but that's also an opportunity to love. If we can love, then something amazing, you know, has happened to us and to the person that we love. Yeah.
I thought of some things while you were talking. Not that I wasn't listening, but you're triggering some memories. A couple of things from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. One was he wrote a poem called Love, and there's a line in it in which he said, individual love is concentrated universal love. I kind of like that. It's something you said reminded me of that. So you can remember, if you ever, when you were a kid, you get a magnifying glass and start and burn things with the sunlight. You know, concentrating the sunlight. So it plays into what we're talking about here. The sort of universal field of love, and individual love is a focus of that, a concentration of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. It's like focusing down to one person. That's the beauty of a relationship, is that it allows you to love in that way. It has nothing to do really with the person or getting anything back or giving anything. You're just focusing this ray of what you are. I see love and light, you know, as light is sort of a physical way of seeing what this is. It actually, you can see it. You can actually see love as a form of light. So you could direct that ray down to this very point. And it feels wonderful to do that, especially if someone can take it. It's very healing to them. I mean, I actually, all my healing was just really, in the end, was just about love. You know, I didn't understand what it was, but it was just having love, do this and allowing this freedom. One person I remember, a friend of mine that I'd worked with, who's also a healer, and I, started with this thing, let the love come through, flow through, and watch this happen. And he ended up like rolling around on the floor, like convulsing, like just like trying to, I guess, resist this. Finally, after, and I was just watching, right? I'd already done this. It was his love, I wasn't doing anything. I was just observing what was happening, kind of amazed. And after a few hours, he stood up and he said,
"He rolled around for a few hours."
Well, I don't know how long. I didn't time this. But he did it for quite a while, and it was quite violent, really. And when he got up, he said, "Who would I be without my suffering?" Right? Because he wanted to hold on to the suffering, and the love was washing it. It was like cleaning him. It was like washing everything out. And he's told other people and me at times, later, he said, it was just like a flood of love, like literally like water just flooding through me, and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't control it, but I wanted to stop it. I wanted to put the brakes on. There's too much. I can't take that much. And we often think that. I mean, I don't know if you've had awakening experience where the bliss is so intense that you don't think your body will be able to take it, and maybe it will kill you. I don't know. I've had that.
No,
So.
I've never had that. It's been pretty enjoyable when I've had bliss, profound bliss. I have had a thing or two, a long time ago when I was only been meditating a couple of years, I had this thing where I became so unbounded that it was scary. It was like there was no up, no down, no near, no far. It was just omnipresence, and it was like,
right.
Whoa, this is too much,
Yeah, that's like samadhi.
Yeah.
Samadhi. It's this feeling of everything falls away, you've gone, and what is there? And there's no concepts at all. And it's sometimes the physical experience of that can be intense. Even love can be so intense you think like, oh my God, the body can't stand it. I've gone through this many times. What happens is the body adjusts to it.
Yeah.
You basically go to sleep, and the next day you can take all of that, and the body has actually transformed in a way to hold that much more energy. So this has gone on, I don't know, maybe a dozen times for me, these times where I think it's going to kill me. So at this point, I know it's not, because it hasn't. Right? Yeah. It can feel like that, but the body adjusts in a different way, and you find that the body is healthier after that. It's like something has transformed it, has like cleaned it, purified it in some way, so it can take this, more, and because the energy is unlimited, right? It's not going to take the actual full unlimited amount of energy, because it couldn't take that, but it's going to take incremental amounts, more and more and more, so you get closer to that. And that's how the transmissions happen. As this energy got really strong, it transmits to people, somehow people, like, you're just totally in love, and everybody walks into the room, all of a sudden they're happy, right? Because somehow you're transmitting this. And this is like that, but more so. Yeah.
There's an important point you just made, really, that about the body adjusting or adapting. Ayurveda says that, if spiritual evolution that's too rapid can actually damage the body. And I've been in touch with a woman in Spain who's going through a severe Kundalini crisis, has been for quite some time, to the point where she's virtually paralyzed and can't do anything. And it's like her body just can't adjust to the volcanic, huge energy that is coursing through it. So there's something to be said.
I think it's resistance.
Pardon?
I think it's resistance that she's going through.
Could be. Maybe I'll put you in touch with her.
No, it's resistance because of the healing and stuff that I've done, I've just been taught, to just surrender, that all you can do is surrender. In every single circumstance, surrendering is always the best thing to do. And when you do that, it changes. When you start awakening, really, you don't have a subconscious anymore, right? Not all at once, but the subconscious just starts filtering up, and all the things you've repressed in your life, all of a sudden now you're re-experiencing them. You're actually experiencing them for the first time. And if it's something when you were a child or an infant, you're just raw emotion. So you're experiencing that raw emotion of an infant. It's very, very difficult. It's very painful, very challenging. But as that happens, if you resist it and try and repress it again, it's going to be really painful. If you just let it go, it'll come up and be released, come up and be released. You have to experience all of it, but it will come up. It's like a broken heart, right? You have a broken heart means that you have a wall in your heart, and that wall breaks. It's not your heart that breaks. It's not the love that breaks. It's like you've tried to close something in and it breaks. So what happens when your heart really breaks and you let it break and you open to that broken heart, you feel freedom. You feel the expansion, right?
Yeah.
So always about surrendering. It's always about letting go of attachments, because we are life, we are God. When we let go, that's what we are. We are what we truly are without all these resistance. The ego is just made of attachments and resistance. It has so much, and things are stuck in our body, and releases it.
Brings up a couple of thoughts. One, it kind of reminded me of the old acid days, where if you started fighting it, like freaking out and like, this is scary, then it would get worse. But if you just surrendered to it, it would be pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. But you resist persists, right? What you resist persists. This is why any suffering, any physical illness that we have, as long as we're resisting it, as long as we're calling it cancer, we're calling it like, some disease or illness, or calling it the flu, right? And we're saying, oh, I got the flu, it's so bad, I have the flu, it's terrible. This is a resistance to what's really happening, because the flu is not this bad thing. The flu is a cleansing process to get rid of stuff that you've put in your body that you shouldn't have in there, right? It's just being unhealthy, not exercising enough, whatever you're doing to make it harder for your body to do its natural healing job. This is like releasing that. And the symptoms are, a sore throat, headaches, fever, but it's a cleansing, healing crisis, they call it.
Yeah.
So if we allow it to be the healing crisis and say, this is a benefit that's helping me, it doesn't really feel bad. Still a headache, still that, but our attitude toward it is totally different. You could have terrible pain, and if our attitude is different, it's not a problem.
Yeah, I mean, you see these ads on television for flu remedies where people pop the flu remedy and then they go out bowling or working on an oil rig or something like that. Instead of allowing then basically what they've done is they suppress the symptoms. Instead of allowing it to.
What do you want to do? You want to go to bed.
Yeah.
You want to rest. You want to sleep for 12 hours. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. That's how your body heals. You can't go out running and expect it to, it's using its energy for healing, and it's showing you exactly what you need to do.
Yeah, although I did see a story on the news the other night where this woman who got stage 4 breast cancer at the age of 27 for some reason, and was going through chemo, managed to deal with the fatigue by getting into exercise. She'd go out jogging, and the doctors were saying, they were finding that this is actually, I don't know if anyone could do this, but it was actually helping her heal. Oh
yes, no, that does. It does in that way. But the flu is only asking you to sleep for one day.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just you feel really exhausted, you rest. I mean, our society is so screwed up in that way. You work in a company, and when you're tired, you just get more coffee. You don't take a nap. No one's allowed to take a nap. If you're sleeping at your desk, you could get fired. But that's what you're supposed to do. Your body is clearly saying you need to take a nap now.
Yeah, Google actually provides nap rooms.
Yeah, that's sensible. That's like going along with the truth of life. Because we live in a dream world, in our own dream world, but our whole society is based on our individual dream worlds. The society is a dream world. It's not dealing with truth the way it is.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit more about relationships. That's always a popular topic with people. So I was reading your book, and there was one point that you made that made me a little skeptical, and let's see how you address this. Basically, you were saying that, you go from relationship to relationship because you need to learn different lessons, and if you've learned the lessons you need in one relationship, then, it's time for the new one. And and unless you're like a real slow learner or you have a lot of lessons to learn in one relationship, then you might stay with a person for a lifetime or something. And
Yeah.
I take exception to that a little bit. I mean, that would imply that, Zsa Zsa Gabor and Elizabeth Taylor were real quick learners and went through all these marriages, whereas George and Barbara Bush, were slow learners or something. There perhaps are lessons to be learned in terms of perseverance and loyalty and dedication, and maybe you go deeper in certain ways if you kind of weather the storms and hang in there than you do if you just sort of bail when things seem to go flat, to mix metaphors.
Well, I'm not saying that, but it's about learning, and most people in relationships don't learn. They just repeat the same lesson over and over and over again,
Yeah.
maybe their entire life, and never learn anything about what they're supposed to learn. But each relationship gives you that learning. It's not just the purpose of relationships, it's the purpose of everything in life itself. Mm-hmm. Everything is giving you this, you get a traffic ticket, you get a flat tire, all of this is teaching you. There's nothing that happens in life that is not teaching you, and relationships are that too. There's something that teaches you. They can teach you some very powerful inner lessons if you're willing to look at it, because people are mirrors, right? If we see the person as a mirror, and we're not saying like, you're so, lazy, or so flirtatious, or so whatever, so grouchy, whatever it is we're saying about the person. And we just put it back and say, I'm so lazy, I'm so this.
Sounds like Byron Katie.
Yeah, like Byron Katie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Byron Katie's definitely on the right track, particularly with puncturing your concepts, saying everything you think is not true. It's very, I know with my students, it's very hard for them to totally take that full, absolute step to say, like, every thought that I ever have had and ever will have cannot be true.
Yeah.
It's like, well, because they're hoping one will be, or they're thinking, well, this one was, but they never are, because thoughts are concepts. Thoughts are abstractions of reality.
But I get the impression from your book that you've been through a lot of relationships, and
well, I'm not like a
philanderer or
or using person, or
Yeah.
something. Ever. It's always been love.
Yeah.
It's always been about love. I mean, my last marriage was 22 years. It was amazingly beautiful, and I learned like a huge amount, and it was beautiful. I mean, I lucked out to be with a woman who is like an extraordinary person. Maybe this might be the only, the most, one or most perfect person or something for me. But that ended, it ended because something else had to happen. I mean, she wasn't going to follow me into a monk life.
Right.
And she wasn't going to follow me into the way that my, spiritual path was going. And even, it's funny because when I moved to Sedona, she said, my youngest daughter, Lindsay, she was the one I had in the second marriage. She said that Lindsay and I are worried about you. We think you're going crazy, with this healing and stuff. And I said, like, oh, well, I said, all I know is that I'm happy, and if that's crazy, then I'll take it. And that calmed her. She felt like, okay, we don't have a problem anymore, he's happy, because she could tell I was happy,
Yeah. Reminds me of something my father said to me one time. I had done the monk thing for a while, and then at a certain point I said, hey, Dad, I've got a girlfriend. You'll be happy to know I have a girlfriend. And he said, I don't care whether you have girlfriends or not. He said, I'm miserable, and you seem to be a pretty happy guy, so whatever you're doing, you know better than I do.
Yeah, and I think that's what you thought.
Yeah.
I mean, not that she's miserable, but
yeah. So maybe we could just dig into this a little bit more. So I mean, what would you have to say with regard to, enduring relationships that might last many, many decades or a lifetime, versus moving from one to the other. Like you just said, a lot of people, they keep making the same mistakes over and over again. And I think the statistics show
Why not stay with the one if you're going to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the statistics show that second marriages, end in divorce even more than first ones do, which is about, first ones are 50% in this country, and perhaps it even gets worse with the third and fourth. So, I mean, what would you recommend in terms of like hanging in there and working through things versus bailing and trying something new? And this can all be related back to the whole theme of awakening and spirituality.
Yeah. Well, it's about the lessons, So bailing and staying are not what it's about. It's about the lessons, right? So are you learning something here? You don't have to think about that. I mean, you kind of know, right? Because if a marriage becomes really, maybe you'd call it flat, right? Just flat, just like, yeah, we're kind of roommates and not even that, it's like I barely really want to talk to her, but I have no interest in her anymore. It's time to go at that point, right? If you have no interest in being married, why be in the marriage anymore, right? There's no interest. But if you're having conflicts and fighting and stuff, there's a lesson there to be learned. You're not learning it, like that. In that case, you want to get to the point, not where flatness is, but where love is, right? If you're fighting, hating each other, there's still a lesson there, right? You're going to probably leave that relationship if you do and go into another one that's just like that, right? Yeah. You have to learn why that's going on.
Well, it's like, look at your parents and mine, for instance. My father was also an alcoholic, and they stayed together for the sake of the kids,
Exactly.
And my mother ended up, trying to commit suicide 3 times and going into mental hospitals because she was so abused. So it would have been a lot better for the kids and for them to just...
That's what I used to pray when I was a kid when my parents would go away on a trip to Europe or whatever, that they would get in a plane crash or something so we'd be free.
Yeah.
I mean, I was only like 7 years old or 6 years old when I did that, but I did it all the time, So it's, to stay together for the sake of the kids. It was not helping the kids at all. We would have done a lot better being out in the street, Yeah.
All righty. So,
so I'm not saying in the relationship that it's like, anything that I say only comes through this other thing. I have no personal opinions about this at all. I don't have any personal opinions about anything really. But I was shown with, I had one relationship with a woman, Lily, who was an awakened person, and I wasn't. And so I had this relationship with her and my ego was still there. And I thought, I'm, a great meditator and I'm teaching meditation. She can learn a lot from me. She's just a yoga teacher or whatever. But she was awake and I wasn't. And she was very humble. She would never say anything about it like that. It was afterwards that I realized this. And when it was over, it also was really interesting how it came to be. And I think I also feel this too. When relationships come to be, they're not what we think they are. They're not that we think, that's the person for me. Or something else is going on that is this infinite intelligence, like all of life, is guiding you to this person and guiding this person to you for specific purposes that the mind doesn't understand and maybe never will. A lot of it the mind will never understand, and that's perfectly okay. So with Lily, I just felt this connection with her so thoroughly and so quickly, there was no getting to know. It was just just totally bonding, just totally in love, and both of us felt that. So I thought, well, that's really interesting. I mean, I usually try and suss things out and go step by step, how much I'm going to open my heart, but it was just bang, just there, full out. And not only that, it was this radiance, this radiance was pouring out of her. And because I was with her, also pouring out of me. So when that was, at some point, she wanted me to move in with her and move to another place. And I was dragging my feet. I said, I don't know if I could do that yet. I'm a little bit, this is happening so quickly, like in 3 months or something. So, she just, at some point, she just decided, okay, well, that's fine. If you're not going to come up here, okay, that's over. And like, you know, good to know you or whatever. Or, you know, we learned our lessons and that's it, basically, is what she said. So at some point, you know, I thought like, oh crap, I made a huge mistake. You know, this is like my soulmate. This is my, you know, twin flame, or words like that, you know, these concepts that I had. And now I blew it because there's just one. And this is like, you know, destined through eternity or whatever. This like very dramatic feelings. And did I totally blow it? So I asked, you know, I just asked God. I said, you know, so is that my twin flame? Is that my like soulmate? Is that the one shot that I have with that? Did I totally blow it? Should I go back and, you know, try and repair things? And that's when I heard no, none of it is that. There is no such thing as these things. It's all for lessons. It's all for your learning to what you truly are. And she was the one person in the world that you needed to be with at that time to learn what you needed to learn. And it was amazing. I mean, I learned, I had my first past life experience with her. Since then, many, but that was the first one. And she'd had many before. It was like old hat to her.
Were you trying to have it, or did they just,
no,
happen?
It just happened. Believe me, I wouldn't want this one. You know, it was very traumatic. It was very, a great deal of suffering, a great deal of suffering. It prompted me to move to Sedona and a lot of other things to try and figure out why that happened and how I had a past life experience. The way I experience them is, it's a strange thing. It's not like anything else. It's literally like simultaneously being in two places at the same time. So you're, you know, here, right? At this point, we were like in bed, and then you're in this totally other place at a completely other time in a different body. But it's literally happening. It's not like a memory. It's like you can, you know, you can feel the sun on your skin. You can smell things. It's like all your senses are active at the same time. You're literally in that place and in this place at exactly the same time. It's just that you can't see your face, you know. It's like you're in that body and you can see your body, but you can't see your face unless there's a mirror. And at this point, this was a Native American shaman. And basically the reason I had this is because, you know, I was asking this question: how do we know each other? Maybe we were together in a past life, you know, just the things you say. And then all of a sudden she said like, oh, I have something, I want to do something. And she went and she put on this music of Native American chanting. You know, and then she laid in bed and watched me. And all of a sudden, this whole thing came back to me. There was like these Union soldiers, blue-coated soldiers, came into the village. I was like an old man, like 100 or so. And they would take me every day and prop me up by this tree in shade, because it was around here. So there was no shade, this one tree, and the rest of it was just open sun. And the soldiers came in and burnt the village to the ground. And my granddaughter, I love my granddaughter above everyone else, because she was going to be the shaman. She was a natural healer. She was born to be a healer, and this would be the first female healer that the village had ever had. And I was so proud of her. And I was dying, you know, I was old, not in the dying part, but soon. So, you know, I was so happy that she was going to come in. The soldiers came in, burnt the village down, and killed every single person there, every single person, but they left me. And I could see that they killed my granddaughter. And they left me.
Did you ever do historical research and find out whether this really happened?
I don't know how I would do that.
Well, there might be some record of it, you know.
They did destroy a number of Native American villages. This was a small village, so I think it was during the time, maybe when, I don't know if it was in Sedona or not. Either that was all the village he had, or it was a traveling one, you know, they could travel with them. So maybe it was like, this is coming to Sedona to do the sacred worship or whatever, and then go back to the other place. And so I realized that Lily, my girlfriend, was the granddaughter.
Oh.
And she knew that. She knew that because she'd already had that same experience before. She knew all about everything that I described. And it was traumatic. I mean, I just sobbed for hours, you know, and then it came back to me many times after that, you know, just as traumatic experience. It was so traumatic. I hated those soldiers so much. And I died, slowly starving to death up there, dying of thirst and starvation, with my heart completely hating white people. Right? And then my next life, white person. Perfect, right?
Is this your next life, or was there an
This is my next life.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, about maybe 300 years or something like that.
No, you hung out for a while before this one.
Yeah. Well, no, I hung out, and I also remember the hanging out part. Yeah, I remember the hanging out part, and that was amazing because, like, I had spirit guides, right? You know, people. It's like, okay, there's the overall everything, God, whatever you want to call it, and then filtering through an expression of God comes all the way down to humans. But before that, there's like beings in other realms that are not other realms. I don't know what, they're just not in form. Right? They're not in the form that we can see. That's all. So there's that, and then down, you know, lower, and eventually into physical form. But it's all still just an expression of God. So I still just called it God, but it was clearly coming through different kind of formless, you know, beings according to what I needed at any point. One of them happened to be this past life called Little Rock, this Native American who appeared to me when I could see it in a younger version, when he was a brave, before he was a shaman, you know, not an old man. So, oh, now I lost track of where that was, where I was going.
Well, you're just talking about the life between life.
Yeah, life between. Oh,
memory.
So I remembered, because I had these spirit guides, that I was a spirit guide, that I was in that formless dimension helping people in the form dimension. And that's like an amazing life, you know.
That was during the 300-year hiatus?
Yeah. Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, it was so beautiful because without the physical body, there's not these restrictions of the physical body. Plus, we're conditioned with emotions like fear and anger and envy and despair. None of that. That doesn't have that. It's only the essence feeling of love, peace, and bliss, always, only, and just full out. And the challenge, and why I chose to come, and at one point, when I had that experience, I just wanted to leave and go back there. I didn't want to be in a physical body. I just desperately wanted to be back there and not in a physical body. And that had a lot to do with my awakening finally, and the next time. It was the reason that I came down, which I discovered, was because, or into this form, was because when you're in that form, to communicate with people in form, when you're in that formless state, to communicate with people in form, it's very difficult, because their energy, their vibration has to be open enough so that you can match enough, so you can even get that feeling, the intuition, or the words, you know, from that. And then they have to pay attention, you know. So you can be open in that, but you could just go, no, not that. Yeah, turn on the television. Oh, what's another distraction? We're distracted like crazy in this life. So you can just ignore it, like I did for so long. They were with me my whole life, but I mostly ignored it, you know, until I stopped, until I was shown, just don't ever ignore it again, and you live like that. And I realized that what I was then, before I came into form, I'm still the same. Nothing has changed. I just have a form. So this form is no problem. And that was shown to me too, because I had cancer like maybe 12 years ago or so. And I was shown that, well, basically, you know, I'd been doing Buddhist practice for a while, and I felt like I'd sort of reached a spiritual plateau, which I was quite happy with. That it was like, I would like to go more, but this is good. I have equanimity and not suffering, and so I had the cancer, and I thought, well, I asked the doctor, I said, how long would it be, what would happen if I didn't have surgery? And he said, well, it would probably progress, and you'd probably be dead in 5 years if you did nothing about it throughout the whole time. And I thought, that's okay. I'm ready for that, you know? My career had done really well. I couldn't really get much further on that. My kids were things were starting to work out pretty well for them. You know, I felt the family was doing pretty well. So I felt done, you know, and I thought, well, okay, I'll come back again and then I can wake up, right? Because I've sort of reached a plateau. Next time I'll start from here and then I'll be able to do it, because I'm not going to do it in the rest of this life probably. So that's okay. I'm ready to go, you know, and also I got 5 years to make peace with everybody, to make sure everybody's comfortable with that. We'll talk about it. And so they won't have any regrets that they didn't say something to me. I talked to my kids about it. But nobody that I knew wanted to go along with that. Everybody said, just go to the doctor. You're a baby. You never go to doctors. You're just afraid of doctors. Don't, you know, do this. And then I talked to my friends in the Sangha, and they said the same. Oh, I had surgery 5 years ago. So we all have surgery. Just go. Don't be, you know, afraid of that, or don't, you know, just go and have the surgery. So I figured, okay, there. At the same time, I had this, like, you know, this still silent voice came across like a megaphone. Do not have the surgery. Oh. This is what's supposed to happen. This is destined to happen. And if you do this, this is like a huge sacrilege to God, you know, a huge, you know, this is planned. This is what's supposed to happen. So just die at that point, you know, you're supposed to, that's it. And, you know, don't rock the boat. You don't know what you're messing with. And so what I figured, well, in a democracy, there's like 100 people that want me to have the surgery, and there's just God who doesn't want me to have it. So I guess that loses, right? 100 to 1. Maybe it'll give him 10 because it's more than people, but that was my thinking. And how bad could it be? And they just convinced me to do it. And I knew they loved me and I didn't want to hurt them. So, and I thought, how bad can it be? You know, so I went and I had the surgery, and I spent the next 3 years living in hell. Wow. Just living in hell. It was all the spiritual work that I'd done and had just been like ripped out of me. And I was like this empty shell, you know, there was like sort of just the outside body and there was nothing inside, and not in a good way, not in a real emptiness way. This was like just a living dead person, you know, no feelings.
Do you mind my asking what kind of cancer it was? What kind of surgery?
Bladder cancer.
Okay, yeah. So you had the surgery, and what did that entail?
It entailed putting like this, I don't know how big a thing, like up your penis, right, mm-hmm. into your bladder, mm-hmm. and then burning the cancer mm-hmm. out, and then taking pictures and then pulling stuff out for a biopsy and all this stuff like that.
And you were in hell because?
I was in hell because I didn't listen to this inner voice.
No, but what was your actual experience? Were you in pain, or did you lose any sense of spiritual progress you had made, or what?
Oh, God, I lost all of it.
Just felt like a flat and dull.
Like that had never happened. The last 30 years never did anything. You know.
Why do you suppose the surgery had that effect on you?
Because I went against this inner voice, and this inner voice was really important to listen to. This was the truth, and I was listening to everything that was out of the dream that wasn't true. And you know, to teach me that I should listen. So I went through 3 years in hell. Literally, it was just, it's indescribable how bad it was. You know?
But now it's 12 years later, and you're still alive, and you have had an awakening, which, you know...
Because of that. Because I went against it, and then because I went against it and saw how bad it would be and suffered through that, so I said, never again will I ever not listen to this inner voice. So I made that thing. And then 5 years after the surgery, on the anniversary of when I was going to die, well, one thing happened. My daughter was having trouble with alcohol and drugs, and so we had her in therapy. And once a week, the parents would go to the therapy. We would have the family therapy. And when we'd go there, the therapist would often say, you'd ask everybody what they would like as an outcome, or what they wanted in their life, you know. And then he asked me, what do you want in your life? And I said, I want Lindsay to be happy. He said, no, you. What do you want for you? I said, I want Lindsay and Judith to be happy. He said, no, you, what do you want? And I had no idea. I had not a clue. And so I said, I want to be happy. I just made it up. I had no idea what I wanted. I just wanted to stop asking me because I didn't know what I wanted.
Yeah.
And then I went to a workshop about organization or something. It had nothing to do with spirituality, really. But they'd ask that same question: what do you want in your life? How do you want your business to be run? What do you want? What do you want? And I didn't know, And I was talking to the teacher afterwards, and she said, if you don't know what you want in your life, you're not fully human. No one can relate to you if you don't really know what you want. And so that stuck in my mind. And then on the 5th year anniversary, it struck me as what I wanted. I had that feeling of what it was like to be before I manifested, the in-between time from the last life. And that's what I wanted. I didn't want to be in a human form anymore. And there was nothing else that I wanted but that. In other words, I guess I wanted to die. But I wasn't depressed. I just didn't want to be in the human form anymore.
Right.
Really didn't want to be in the form, but I didn't know what to do. I mean, because, I couldn't commit suicide. We already had a suicide in the family, my son-in-law, and it just devastated all of us, including me. So I couldn't do that to my family at all. And I was thinking, like, well, what could I do? How could I, die, without them knowing that I killed myself? And I thought, well, maybe I could, join the military and go in the front line. But they knew I was a pacifist and against war, so they would never believe that.
A little old for that.
Yeah, a little old too. And so then I thought, well, maybe if there's a fire, I'll rush into the fire to save someone and burn up or something. But there were no fires. I mean, Somerville, where I was living, had fires all the time, and there were no fires while I was away. So I said, I don't know what to do. So I just did the only thing that I learned to do when I was really at a hard place, is pray to God and ask, what can I do? Please. And this time I was asking for something, not just information, but I wanted God to do something. I wanted to die in my sleep so no one would think I committed suicide of natural causes or something. And if God granted me that, I would give up everything that I loved, everything that I was proud of, my talent, everything that I ever wanted or was proud of in life. It's easy to give up what you don't want, but I said, I'm giving up everything that I care about, that I feel proud of, that I, like my creativity, my relationships, my family, everything. I'll give all of that to you if you just take my life. And I was really desperate. And what happened was this: I realized that I don't care, that the body is no problem. It's no problem at all. It's your ego. That's the problem. The body is no problem. The ego, this self-centered thinking, that's your problem.
That's the thing you really wanted to have die.
Yeah, I didn't know that. And
Right.
God said, in the 5 years, that was going to die anyways. You weren't physically going to die at all, because actually the cancer was in remission. It was healing itself when they found it.
On its own.
On its own. Well, I'd been on a macrobiotic diet. I was exercising
Right.
3
So
hours.
even if you hadn't had the surgery, it probably would have healed.
Yeah, but
I
in
see.
5 years, the ego would go.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
see.
So it wasn't physical death, it was the ego death,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, but all of it was perfect because I resisted this, and so a lot of the ego didn't just go at that point, but it's like a chunk of it sort of left. And I had the realization that nothing had changed with the body. I still was exactly this free spiritual spirit being, the same as I was before. Not only that, I was the whole thing, God, but I didn't get to that point yet. I just realized I was the spirit being, that other level, that higher level, in a physical body. And the reason why I was in a physical body that was good, that I can use this for teaching people. It was then that the healing began, and even a stronger connection to God. Like God just worked through me to heal people, and I would surrender. And then if I ever didn't surrender, I thought, I've got an idea how to help you, or I had this experience. It would just dead. It would just kill the whole healing process. Mm-hmm. So I learned, just shut up, and what comes out of your mouth will just be not you, whatever's supposed to come out. And you just sit there listening to it. Mm-hmm. And it was so beautiful. I would hear my voice and it would go, oh, I wish I had a voice like that. It was coming out of my mouth, but it just sounded beautiful. It just sounded so loving and so perfect. And even the tone of it sounded beautiful. So it just taught me bit by bit to just totally let go and totally surrender. And then when I started teaching, it was the same. My friend said I was teaching he went on a trip and he told me to take over his group. And I said, I don't know what to do. What am I going to do? And he said, well, that's perfect. Just go and hold the space. You know how to go into the space. Just go there and hold the space. So I did, and words came out of my mouth. And all was perfect for each person there. So I thought, wow, you know, how effortless this is, right? You don't do anything at all. You just surrender. And then everything that you need, just, you know, whatever's supposed to happen comes out perfectly. So I learned that. And then at some point I said, why don't I live like this all the time? That's what I want, because I want to have this perfect voice. I want to be this thing. I want to just live my whole life, like what I eat, what I, you know, going into a store, talking to someone. I want them to be healed just because I walked into the store and bought something, you know. And I want always this radiance to be expressed. And then I went in these long retreats. Then I started doing these long, you know, month-long silent retreats to just saturate in this, you know, like Muji says, zip yourself up in the sleeping bag. So every year I do that. I just sort of drop into these places. I tell my students I'm not going to see them. No one's coming to the Zendo for a period of time. And I'm in Sedona, so they accept that now. All my friends accept it, that I'm not going to see them until that happens. Girlfriends maybe have a little harder time with it, you know, which I don't know if I ever will have another relationship like that again, you know, because of that. Because this part is very important. It's like, it's very natural, you know, it's like a tree. All the leaves fall off a tree in the winter, right? And this is when I feel called to go into it. The leaves fall off the tree, and the sap like goes in, you know, but there's a lot of stuff happening there. A lot of transformation and stuff is happening for the tree and for me, right? I don't know what it is. It's just happening. I don't have a concept about it, but it's changing and transforming, and often there's these states of like enormous bliss, right? And then the body adjusts to it, and the radiance, more light is able to come through the physical body. And then come springtime, the buds are coming out in the tree, and I'm like flowering, you know? So now all this loving energy that was percolating and building is like now expressing out into the world, in people, in everything that I see. You know, this radiance is like coming out, and every year it's the same thing. It just becomes more, just becomes more all the time, simply from just not talking to anybody for a few months.
It's a nice routine.
Yeah, I don't know what a marriage would be like that. It's a little, I mean, going more intense into this, but it's also showing me this love is here. So there's no need of anything. There's no need of anything at all. Everything that's needed is God. And this is whole, you know, like, I mean, I love my ex-wife, Judith, you know, she is like an amazing person. And I feel very sad that when she's suffering, I feel her suffering. I'm so connected with her, but I am connected with her. You know, I don't have to live with her because she cannot be separate from me, nor can anybody else. So I can go for 7 months without talking to a single person, and never for a moment do I feel any loneliness, not even for a second. It's like just absolute completion. If anything, I'm more connected then than I am when I'm with a person, because I'm sort of connected with everything, and all people too, all individual people. And I think I've explained this to them, and I think they know it and they feel it, like, oh, I'm not going to see him for like this period of time, for this month, but he's not separate from me. He's thinking of me, and I'm like one with him. And then when I do see him, somehow it's going to be wonderful. You know, there's going to be some radiance that's going to have an experience.
When you do these retreat things, do you have somebody doing your shopping for you and stuff, or do you you do that kind of thing? You go to the store and buy.
I go to the store, but initially when I started doing it, I would go to the store 5 minutes before it closed. You know, so I just rush around, and no one would have time to talk to me, because I could always run into someone that I hadn't told that I was doing this, and they, Peter, because I'm very verbal, as you could tell, you know, so that we'd have this long conversation. They're used to that, but when I'm doing that, if someone comes up and says, "Oh, Peter, it's wonderful to see you. How are you?" and I go, "Fine."
Or you could say, "I'm doing silence for a few months. Good to see you. I'll talk to you when I come out."
I don't even want to go that far.
Okay.
I just hope they'll go away. You know? So, I mean, I love them, but I don't want to get in a conversation, you know? So it would be good to say that. It sounds, because then people get this feeling that for some reason, I don't like them.
Yeah, you don't want to mislead people.
Yeah. So after when I come out, when I see them, I go, you know, I really do like you. And it wasn't that. I'm just in a silence. And they go, oh, okay. I get it.
Good.
But most people now know this, that I'm this strange person.
You go through these.
Yeah, I do this every year. In the winter too. It's like the winter retreats.
Yeah.
It happens to come in just at the time of the winter retreats. It may be a little longer than 3 months, but it just works perfectly. I mean, I'm looking at spring and seeing that nature, I'm realizing I'm just no different than a tree. I'm just doing the same thing. It's like life is living me, right? And so that's what life does, you know? It comes in the thing, and then in the spring it like blossoms. And I've actually done it before I ever knew anything about this. When I lived in the city, I lived in the Northeast, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, or Somerville. It's snowing and cold there in the winter, and people just naturally, I would go in, I would do a lot of writing, a lot of creative work during that time. And as soon as the first day of spring would come, I would walk into Harvard Square and I would see like 30 people I knew. And everybody was doing that. And it was just wonderful. It was like everyone was a flower, everyone was a budding flower. It was just spring, and we were so happy, you know, to do that. But in the winter, we went into caves, you know, we all did. Yeah.
Like bears.
Yeah.
Here's a question that came in from Mark Peters in Santa Clara, California. It seems like the opposite of love, if there is one, is not hatred, as is generally held, but something closer to fear, or maybe the lack of presence. Can you share your insights on this?
The opposite of love?
Yeah, he's saying it seems like the opposite of love is not hatred, but something closer to fear or lack of presence.
Yeah. I don't think hatred probably has some element of love in it, actually. You know, if you really hate someone, you're super emotional about them, right? You're connected to them, right? I just can't stand Donald Trump. Every time I see, there's some connection there, some learn.
Yeah, there are stories in the Vedic literature where someone would really hate Krishna, you see.
Yeah.
And they'd be, you know, just focused on him like a laser beam all the time, hating him, trying to kill him and all that stuff. And then they'd end up getting enlightened because they were so focused on him.
Yeah. Just like the love, just like the magnifying glass of the love.
Yeah.
So fear is, because fear is resistance, right? We're always resisting with fear. We go like, okay, life, you stay there, you know, just not too close to me. That's kind of what the ego's doing, right? The physical posture of the ego is like, don't come too close until I figure out if it's okay, if you're safe or not. You know, if you can do something for me or to me, I don't want you to do something to me. I want, you know, we're resisting. So fear is resistance. And that is, the opposite, because love is no resistance. There's no separation. So what is there to resist? Who is resisting, right? It's just gone. So you're so open, right? And the beauty of it is we all experience this, right? Every time we see something of beauty or experience love, we have that lack of resistance, lack of fear, lack of separation. We're never going to look at a beautiful flower and you know, be like, oh, I love this, but I'm kind of afraid. If that, you're not really loving it enough. There's still a little bit of resistance to it. When we totally open and go, oh, it just took my breath away, you know, then we're experiencing what it's like not to resist. Attachment and resistance are the only things that keep us away from this bliss of awakened consciousness. It's very simple, really.
Yeah.
Rocket science, right? It's just whatever we're attached to is going to prevent us from opening to that, from even having it or even seeing it, right? And whatever resisting is the same. I mean, one form of meditation is simply to not resist life, to just accept everything that's happening in this moment. It's beautiful, you know, just for a moment, just everything that's happening in this moment, just allow it to be exactly as it is. If you're feeling fear in that moment, allow that to be exactly as it is. Don't wish it away, just experience it. And that's how we heal fear, right? We totally open to it, and then it just sort of fades away. Right? But we can't resist it if we go like, no fear. I don't want to feel any more fear. I want to keep fear away. Yeah, we're just going to keep it as long as we keep doing that. It's going to be. It's so funny. It's the opposite of what we learn, isn't it? It's the opposite of how we've been conditioned. The truth of life is the opposite of our conditioned world.
I have a question for you. You're talking about, I forget the woman's name, who was like, you thought she might be your soulmate, and she triggered
Lily.
Lily. She triggered that past life experience, and at that point you said, well, she was awake and I wasn't. And you made comments like that several times during the interview, which kind of indicates a kind of a black and white on-off understanding of what awakening is. Is that the way you see it? I mean, is there some kind of threshold which one crosses, and after that one can definitively say, well, now I'm awake and I wasn't? Or is it more kind of gradations and many degrees of awakening?
No, I think many degrees of awakening, yeah. It's all a process. It's all a progress. But there's a...
So you were awake then, just not to the same degree?
Yes, exactly. She was much more awake than I was.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought I was awake. Not awake, but I thought I was pretty, highly spiritually developed. I mean, all my life I've had certain things, like the sensitivity that comes from this empathy where I can feel people's feelings and their thoughts and things like that, which was a survival mechanism for me that I never learned how to shut down. Mm-hmm. And I realized that everyone has this, but everybody's learned to shut it down because it's really hard to be in the world and just, go to school and you're feeling everybody's thoughts and feelings. It's challenging to say the least, Yeah. Okay.
I just wanted to ask that because, I mean, when I hear people talk that way, it puzzles me a bit because it doesn't jive with my own experience, which is that, I could say I'm a heck of a lot more awake than I used to be, and at the rate things are going, I'm probably not as awake as I will be. But I never, and there have been some significant, some significant milestones.
I would say the same.
Yeah,
I was using, it's in language we're doing, to be quick about it. You know, say like awake or not awake is easier than saying her, progression of awakeness was higher than mine was at the point. Then we missed the story by kind of trying to figure out what level that was.
But it's good to clarify, because otherwise people, they scratch their heads and they think, well, geez, maybe, I guess I'm not awake because I haven't had some big, aha thing. But for many people, some people do have big aha things, but many people it's just this gradual incremental thing, which is if you could snap back to where you were 30 years ago, it would be catastrophically different. But it's just grown like the way your body grows or something. You know, you don't notice it from day to day so much.
Absolutely, and actually that's a good point too, Rick, because one of the things that I say in the book too, before I tell the story of my awakening, I spend at least 2 or 3 pages, saying this is not your awakening. Your awakening is happening for you. So don't think you have to have any single one of any of these things in my experience or to look at your thing or anybody else's experience that you hear here, right? This is our own awakening is going to be very unique because how we were conditioned to be asleep is very unique for every one of us. So it's going to be different. So the thing to pay attention to, you can use inspiration from listening to Ramana's or Eckhart Tolle's or mine or anybody's, but the thing to pay attention to is yours, is what's happening in you, in every moment, because that's the awakening that matters. My awakening doesn't matter. Yeah,
and even here the terminology is tricky because it's not like awakening is something that a you gets, it's lived through the vehicle of an apparent you, but it's obviously something more impersonal than that.
It's freedom from that you. It's the freedom from that you. It's like if the you dissolves, then there's just life. And there's still a body and everything, but is this body not life? Yeah. Is this different than a tree or a bud or a flower? It's different in some ways, but it's life. It's not different in that this is not life and the tree is life. It's all life. And when you surrender the you, that's what happens, right? You feel this not separation. Even oneness is a word that we get conceptualized. It's better to say what it's not.
Yeah. Here's a good question that just came in from Susan in New York. you mentioned you had a pretty rough childhood, and so did I. I mean, but my childhood was absolutely rosy compared to what some people go through. You know, I mean, I didn't grow up in, you know, Syria or something like that. But here's her question. She said, I'd like to know what he would say about children who are abused by their families, what the purpose of that is in terms of our development and awakening.
Yeah, well, I was abused. I mean, my father was very violent, you know, and knocked me out at times and, you know, knocked me unconscious. I was terrified of being killed, you know. So.
Yeah.
And also my mother was quite violent too.
So do you look back and see an evolutionary value in that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, in Buddhism, they talk about the lotus growing out of the mud, right? The lotus blossoms because of the mud. And this is a common thing in Buddhism, is that the suffering that you have, you know, is flowers into this awakening. Now, it doesn't happen it's funny because I've seen this so often that I met somebody who her life just seemed really pretty perfect from the time she was born. You know, she's a Christian Scientist, and just everything she said about it is like, I'm so lucky. Everything just flowed, and I was so supported by everybody I knew. And she's wonderful, you know? I mean, she really is in this really wonderful state. As far as the progression of awakening, not as much as I am, but really close. And her feeling of the joy of life and love is very close to that. So she's one person that I met like that. I was really curious because I was very excited to meet someone that had a life like that, because I haven't met anybody like that before. But I think for most people, the suffering from abuse and things like that can very much flower. I mean, look at Eckhart Tolle. He's a perfect example. He lived a hellish life where he probably wanted to commit suicide every day of it until he woke up when he was in his 30s. Know? But it was hellish, and that night he was going to kill himself. Yeah, you know, it just sounds absolutely restricted ego, horrible, you know, thing. But people can feel that. I mean, suffering can come for anybody. You can be living in a palace and be, you know, carried around, and I don't know. You can just live this like as a prince, you know, or a princess, and be given everything. And if your mind is set, your ego mind is set to suffering, then you'll suffer just as bad as somebody in Sri Lanka or dying of starvation, you know, even more depending on where their mind is at, you know, and how restrictive they are with this ego. The ego creates the suffering, not, you know, if you're starving to death, you're starving to death, right? Without an ego, you're just hungry and you're in pain and you're dying.
I'm trying to think of the name of maybe Irene will remember the name of a woman that I interviewed a while back, lives up in Oregon. Had a real horrific childhood, and she was raped by her father and stuff like that. So it speaks to Susan's question.
Yeah.
Can't remember her name at the moment.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. But there's a number of people I've interviewed that have gone through really bad suffering, and they see it as kind of catalytic to their awakening. Like Shruti was another one.
Yeah, I think so, because if your life is really, really perfect, it's going to be harder for you to say, like, okay, I'm going to surrender this. I don't want to surrender it. It's awesome, right? But from a very young age, I was questioning everything because I couldn't trust what adults said. I mean, adults were like crazy, you know. One minute they, you know, alcoholics are funny because everything is unpredictable, you know. It's like, I mean, I didn't, you know, as a teenager, I was a kind of a wild kid. I stole cars. I did with gangs. I was like, you know, like, well, that's how I grew up, you know. So, you know, it was, you never would know what they would do. I could steal a car and they'd say like, hey, that's the chip off the old block. You're really doing like, you know, like really, that happened to me.
Your parents said that?
Yeah, my father was like, yeah, he's a rascal. Look what he did, you know. And then you could just walk in the house for nothing, you know, and not have a smile on your face or something. And then he could like beat the hell out of you, you know. Yeah. So you didn't know what it was. You could come home with a good report card, you know, and then they could hate you because of that, you know, and then you could do something. But it depended. Sometimes you'd do something that society wouldn't like, and they would. It was totally unpredictable, always. You know? So you just never knew, which created a lot of fear because you just never knew what was going to happen. There's these explosions that would just come from nowhere. So that it gives you a sense of not trusting what you're seeing as real, you know? And then in order to survive, I don't know if this happens to other people that are abused, but having that experience of being filled with light and love when I was alone as a relief from being in a place where I was in terror all the time was a super help, super, you know, a catalyst. I mean, it's like I do feel that everything that happens to us is perfect. So it must be all part of this process, all part of this progress. And you can ignore it, right? You can go away from it and just whatever, become a criminal or become an alcoholic yourself and never progress, you know, but the lessons are there. No one's holding your head down and forcing you to learn the lesson, but the lessons are presented. And if you open enough, you'll see the lesson.
Yeah.
You know? That's why the ego is so bad, because it has its own ideas and opinions about what the lesson should be, right? And they're not right, you know? You have to be open, and then you see the lesson. If you think you know what the lesson is, you pretty much don't, right? Because it's come through thinking.
A few points here. One is Irene looked up that woman I was just trying to remember. Shelley Ray was her name. So Susan or others might want to watch that interview. Second thing is, I remembered another quote from Maharishi as you were speaking. He used to say, it's really hard for the angels in heaven to even be interested in enlightenment, because it's just what they don't want to close their eyes. You know, it's just so glorious in what they're living. Here it's much more easy, because you know we're beset by so many things that we really want to find an escape or a solution.
Yeah.
And a third point is just that this point you just made about everything being a lesson. I think it bears reiterating, just that you know, what it implies, or what it leads to, is that there is a sort of an evolutionary motivation or trajectory to the universe. There's a term, evolutionary panentheism, that everything is imbued with intelligence, and that there's an evolutionary momentum or purpose to the whole shebang. You know, the whole show, and if we kind of like keep in mind that, well, you know, God is, if we understand God to be omnipresent intelligence, then how could anything happen capriciously or randomly or accidentally or anything else? And if we further accept or understand or believe that there really is this, you know, I mean, look at the order that has come out of complete disorder. There's the second law of thermodynamics, entropy. Everything crumbles down, you know, if left to itself. But life is this force that is the opposite of entropy, and that emerges from, you know, from disorder. And so that there's this evolutionary drive that is the, you know, the force behind life. And anyway, I guess I made the point that things are not accidental. There's a nature wants to evolve more and more sophisticated forms through which it can know itself.
Yeah. And the important thing of all of that, too, I totally agree with all that. And it's a beautiful understanding of life, is to realize that we don't need to understand it. You know, we just need to surrender to it, because it totally is taking care of everything, not just us, but everything in nature. When we look at nature, I think we love looking at nature because it shows us this, you know. We don't know really necessarily what we're seeing, but it's showing us this evolution. And in humans now, what's evolving is our consciousness, which is extraordinary. I mean, you are a testament to this. You've interviewed like 400 people, right? Where else in history, in human history, has this happened? Human consciousness itself is evolving into this state, and it's an amazing evolution. I mean, I think it's really similar to the Neanderthal to the human. You know, it's that big a thing. When you think about people in this process of awakening, these things that happen, the ability to heal, you know, abilities to know, to psychically communicate with people without words, you know, ability to move to other places without the body moving there and see things that are there. I mean, these are all cities, we call them, right? But these are not uncommon things that happen, you know, maybe not to everybody. and it's not a good idea to be attached to them. You know, they arise when they need to arise, and there's no reason to try and make them better or more.
But they're human potentials.
Yes, they're human potentials, and this is what humans are evolving into. It's something. It's a species that we're not even going to recognize, you know, from here. And for me, the big part of this awakening push that happened, and has been happening, and is still happening now, is like it feels like feel like I'm riding on a tidal wave. You know, there's the power of a tidal wave, and I'm like surfing on it and saying like, okay, I'm going with it. You know, people who are fighting it, it's going to be harder and harder to fight against this and resist it, because this is like enormously powerful. And the more people that are awakening, the more power this has. It's just human consciousness, you know. You can tell there people are dragging their feet a lot, you know. A lot of times people in great power, you know, they want to hold on to that power and not just let go of everything, which is what is being asked, you know. If we're going to go into a new species, we have to let go of the old species. We have to let go of everything. And then we'll be shown by this inner guidance system, like when we let go, awesome, you know, like, wow, this is amazing. You know, whatever it is, when we totally let go to it, we just feel so good. And if we resist it, life has a lot of problems, and worse than it's ever had. You know, we're going to see that. People that are dragging and trying to hold on and resisting this evolutionary process are going to suffer a lot, you know, even if they can live through it.
It's very well put.
But it's wonderful. We're living in a time in this physical body. We are so lucky to have chosen to be in the physical body at this time, to go through this evolution, because I think this is way better than Neanderthal to the human. I think this is like, I don't think maybe they experienced a lot of bliss when that happened too, with the first people that were.
No, this is big.
Up and stuff. Yeah.
I've been reading this wonderful book called Reason and Wonder, A Copernican Revolution in Science and Spirit, by Dave Pruitt. And he traces the whole history of human knowledge and all the various scientific, you know, breakthroughs, you know, such as Copernicus and others, and then kind of brings it up to consciousness and the breakthrough that's happening there, and how that will be as earth-shaking and world-transforming as any previous scientific discovery has been.
Oh, way more.
Fascinating book.
Yeah, because this knows everything. This has, we feel the way to access it is to not know anything, to realize that we don't know anything, just cancel all knowing, you know, take any concept we have and the opposite and put them together until they just dissolve and are gone. And then this infinite knowing is just here. It's just totally available to us. Whatever needs to come is just accessible to us, you know, not even our own memories, but the memories of all humans of all time, whatever we need. It's amazing. It's just unlimited. Yeah. That's all. You know, to try and find out how it's unlimited is, we're just chasing our tails then. We're just making more concepts, but it's enough to just surrender to it and let it do what it does.
Yeah.
You know? And again, it's no different than a tree, you know. We're having this consciousness that can do these amazing things. I can't speak for a tree, what it's doing, but it's not that different than a tree. The tree is also evolving, you know, spiders, insects, they're evolving. Everything is evolving to be the best it can be, to be of the highest benefit for whatever it is, you know. And in us, it happens to be consciousness, which is really pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, we were the first ones to be aware, I think, self-aware. Maybe not. Dolphins are probably far advanced from us. But as far as we know, we're the first self-aware, which is a form of consciousness. It just got us into this attachment to ego, which for a long time created a lot of problems. Yeah.
We better wrap it up because we've been going pretty long. But I just want to read you one more question that came in, because it's a nice question. And pretend you're on NPR, and it's like I'm going to cut you off at a certain point if you answer too long. You know,
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. No, you've been saying great things, and it'll satisfy the people that tell me to, you know, talk less during interviews, because I just let you run with it most of the time. But let me just ask this woman's question. Give it a fairly brief answer, and then we'll wrap it up. So this is Flory from Germantown, New York, who asks, I have had an experience in meditation several times, For example, in meditation today, a thought came into my field of awareness about an experience with someone who, until then, I was not aware had hurt me. Suddenly, I was extremely clear about the situation, healed, and at peace. I felt I put it into words, but in fact, I just knew instantly without words. Does this experience sound familiar? And if it does, would you discuss it?
Well, the awareness of someone that hurt me that I wasn't aware they hurt me, I don't know about that. I don't know exactly what
it sounds
that
like
means.
a repressed thing was resolved, during meditation.
Oh,
I think that's what it was. There's something that she hadn't even been aware of, and it bubbled up, got healed, and boom, gone.
Yeah. Well, I think the feeling of freedom and release from something repressed coming up, yes, is very common. I mean, it is, as far as I know, the only true way for healing, for real healing, for cures of things, putting a Band-Aid on things or cutting out stuff or that is just a very temporary thing. Whatever you do that with, there's a message in there and you're cutting it out, it's just going to come back somewhere else. It's the whole thing about cancer treatment.
Yeah.
So internally, what we do when we repress things, we store them in our body and they can make us physically sick if we don't, let them come up. But when they come up, when we open to it and we let them come up, then they reveal everything about themselves. And one of the things they reveal is they're not true, right? I mean, you look at, oh, I had that thought when I was 2 years old. Oh, okay, that's a 2-year-old thought. And it feels all this stuff. But you see it and it just dissolves. The whole thing dissolves. And one other thing that happens when we do this kind of a healing, if we do this as healing, which is a form of meditation in itself, to open to this is that if we're feeling fear or anger or whatever, these things that aren't our essential nature feelings, they're energy, right? And so the more we can strip off words, say we have a feeling of fear, we're terrified of something, we can just ask ourselves, is it necessary to use that word fear? What if we took that word fear away? Then what's there, right? So then we have sort of anxiety. Is that necessary? We could take that away. And then maybe we have a sensation. Oh, there's a big sensation in my stomach. It's really sensations there, but it's sensation. It's not fear. So you don't have a negative connotation. It's just, wow, there's a sensation there. And we say, is the word sensation even necessary? And then that dissolves. And pretty soon that energy doesn't stay in one place. We realize it's like moving throughout our whole body. It is throughout our whole body. And it's only because we called it fear that it felt bad. It's actually the energy of a living body, which we can celebrate and say, whoa, I'm alive. I'm really alive, right? Because when most of us are not aware of the energy in our body, aware of what it is like to be in a living body where we can feel every molecule in our body, everything from our toe to the top of our head. We can feel all of that intensely, like a little child does, and really it feels wonderful. I mean, we could even call that the feeling of bliss, to just be aware of being in a living body, at any age. It doesn't change, too. I mean, we can be 90 years old and still feel all that energy. It's not the energy that sort of goes away. Only after the body dies is it gone. It's there the entire time. It's no different than when we're really young, this energy. Yeah, so that's a wonderful feeling to have that come up, to just release things in that way, just by being open to them, just by being wide open to everything that is. We let all the things that aren't true show us that, We totally want to see, we're willing for it to show us that it's true. We're totally open to that. And it just happens that it's not. And then it dissolves, It's like we're loving even these negative feelings that are causing us suffering, even suffering, all of it. We're just opening to it. And it resolves itself simply by doing that. It heals itself, amazingly. Things that were stuck in the body, the thoughts come up, we see, we let them go. The energy is released, and it's not stuck in one place, not in the stomach, not in the shoulder, whatever we have. It's throughout the whole body. And there's this wonderful feeling of relaxation and intense aliveness, We are alive, right? Just like the trees in nature, we look and we say, oh, that's alive. But we're not aware that we're alive. We're in this amazing living thing. These bodies are incredible. I mean, I don't identify with my body as me, I think of it more as a car, you know, like a vehicle that I use, but it's an amazing vehicle.
Oh, yeah.
It's a incredible self-healing, amazing vehicle, and it itself is an expression of God, right? So I don't identify with it as me, but I am aware that it's an expression of God, and I totally love it. I take care of it, you know? It's like bodies are funny. They're like, if we were told when we were going to get our first car, we had a, you know, wise salesman that sold us our first, it was a brand new car, and he said, this is the only car that you can have for the rest of your life, in this life. You can get another car in the next life, but only one car can you have in this life. So take care of it. And let's go for a little drive, and I'm going to take you to a place, and he takes you to a junkyard showing you all the other cars that weren't taken care of so well. They're rusting there. So take care of this car, and it'll last you for your whole life, you know, and you can have fun with it. You can take it off road as long as you get the right wheels for it and stuff. But, you know, take care of it. It's beautiful. And at some point you may even identify with it because you've had it for like 50 years or so, you know, but you don't have to. It's just a vehicle, you know.
That's the realization I had when I was 18. I kind of realized, you know, you're stuck in this body, and if you damage it, you're going to be stuck in a damaged body all your life.
Exactly.
So that kind of turned me around, and I've been taking care of it ever since.
Yeah, what you put in it, you know, and fasting is like an oil change, right? Washing it is like going to the car wash.
Yeah.
You know, you just take care of it. You take care of it and you love it, but you don't identify with it. You don't have to think, this is me. So then, you know, because you don't identify with your car, if someone says, hey, that's a nice looking car, you go, yeah, oh, that's cool. Yeah, you like my car. But it's not you, you know. If someone says, I don't like that car, they go, you don't like the car. You know?
It's not you. Yeah. Well, on that note, we should probably wrap it up.
This is good. I wanted to interview you.
Yeah, maybe someday.
Because I was so interested in you know, that you've talked to like almost 400, you know, people, interviewed 400 people. I mean, this is amazing. You're like a vehicle and a conduit for the evolution of consciousness, you know. You are. I mean, you have a position in this evolution of consciousness, which is amazing. When we had that little trouble with the technical thing, you know, the lagging, I went to look at a lot of the things to see if other people were doing that too, and it was so beautiful that we had that. This is how things are perfect. So we had this trouble with this, but it sent me to look at many of your things. So I looked at all of them and I said, oh, this is great. There's so much here from JP Sears, I think. He's hilarious, you know, stuff. What a great interview that was. You're trying to be funny, you know, and he's like hilarious with everything. Yeah. He's really good.
Some people didn't realize that was a joke until about 20 minutes in. They thought I'd really flipped my lid.
It's beautiful, though. I mean, there's such a treasure trove of things here, and it helps all of us, you know, to awaken, just to see what people are going through. And so many people that are in the process of coming into this now are, you know, are benefited from this. I mean, it's part of all of us are helping this awakened consciousness grow, even when we're not aware of it. And as we start awakening, we become aware that this is kind of what our job is, you know. It's like, it's life is evolving. So if we're open to life, we are helping the evolution. Yeah.
And as you know, when you put yourself in the service of this, then you get a lot of support, and you know, your own evolution is accelerated. So it's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Peter.
It's wonderful. It's a privilege to be with you.
Yeah, likewise. Let me make a few general wrap-up points. So I've been speaking with Peter Cutler, and I'll have a page on Batgap where I link to his websites and his YouTube page and his chat. He has a nice Facebook site where he writes a lot of stuff, and some good discussion goes on, and all that. So go, if you're watching this on YouTube and you want to know those things, go to batgap.com, go to Peter Cutler's page. I'll have a link to it right there on the YouTube description. And then you can bounce from there off to all those things. This is an ongoing series, as most of you are aware. And if you go to batgap.com and then go to the At a Glance menu, you'll see all the various things we offer on the site, including, you know, being notified by email of new interviews and subscribing to the audio podcast and so on. So go and check that out. And that's about it. So
one other thing.
yeah, sure.
The book is free on the website.
Yeah, I'm providing a link to that.
Okay. Yeah.
So people
they
can just
get a
download
PDF
it
of it for free. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. So thanks again, Peter, and thanks to those who've been listening or watching, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah, good.